guys, welcome back to Bombchu. I'm Austin and today I'll be covering the Humble Monthly Bundle from July 2017. This month's bundle has 8 games, 7 for Steam, and a smaller experimental bundle exclusive game, as well as a continuation of the comic started in May's bundle. That means we have a lot to cover, so let's get to it. I'll be giving my first impressions of each game and determining if they're games I'd like to continue playing. This month's exclusive title is 2000-1, A Space Felony, a detective game in space and parody of 2001: A Space Odyssey. You're investigating the cause of several dead astronauts on a space station controlled by a computer named Mal. The game consists of exploring the station and taking pictures of evidence. The evidence is described to you and shows up in Mal's room, where you can ask Mal for a statement about it. Mal is a very good liar, but if you find any contradictions in his statements, you can present these contradictions to make him tell the truth about what happened. So the more evidence you find, the more you can find out about what really happened. As small as the total game area is, I quickly got disoriented about which way was which, but that's to be expected when corridors are not simply left, right, ahead, and back, but also above and below. For the dark subject matter dealing with some pretty brutal murders, the game has a lot of humor, and I found myself laughing out loud more than once. The developers are clearly fans of Stanley Kubrick, as there are references to other movies of his littered throughout. This one definitely piqued my interest, and I'll be continuing on to see what else I can find. And if you're interested in past Humble exclusives but missed out on the bundles they were in, Humble monthly subscriptions now come with access to the Humble Trove, which has past exclusives as well as some well-known indie games, all DRM free. Longtime subscribers probably won't find much in the Trove, but it's a nice little bonus for newer subscribers. This is usually where the debut game would go, but once again, Humble didn't go with the debut game this time. Kero Blaster is a retro-styled, side-scrolling shooter from the creator of Cave Story. While this game starts off pretty simple and easy, the levels start to get more interesting as new weapons are introduced, such as the bubble gun, which on flat ground is not very useful, but it's great for taking out enemies and obstacles that are lower than you are since you can't aim your gun down. Each gun can be upgraded a number of times with money, increasing damage, but also often changing the properties of your shots, like making them travel further or making them wider. The story is that some of your company's teleporters have been blocked by some goo, which you're sent to go clean up. Cleaning up the goo is pretty easy, it's everything along the way that makes the game a challenge. New enemies each level with varied and interesting patterns keep you on your toes. And a nice feature to help you along the way is a small but significant control mechanic. If you hold down the fire button, movement will not change where you're looking, and will only move you. This is great for bosses and stronger enemies with lots of projectiles to dodge. In many side-scrolling shooters, I would either have to stop shooting in many situations to focus on dodging, or I would try to get some shots in while running away only to accidentally jump into an enemy. So this is a very welcome feature for me, though it does take some getting used to. If you like the gameplay of Cave Story or you enjoy side-scrolling shooters and have the patience to get through a couple of simpler levels, there's a lot to like here. This is definitely up my alley, and I plan to finish this one. Our next game is Galactic Civilization III, a 4X strategy game in space. As longtime viewers know, this is not my genre, and usually I would ask a friend to come and tackle this one. However, everyone was busy, and the monthly bundle waits for no man. So I stepped in and did my best, and came away somewhat pleasantly surprised. I played the tutorial, and starting off, you manually direct your ships and manage what's being built on your planet. But very quickly, you're allowed to take a more hands-off approach, allowing your planet to build out on its own, favoring whatever you like or taking a balanced approach. You can even set your ships to move on their own, clearing the fog of war, searching for artifacts, looking for enemies, or defending an area. This is great for people like me who hate micromanagement, and allows you to focus on the big picture. Other alien races exist with you and control different areas of space. Your interactions with them will determine if you're at peace or at war, each affording different opportunities. I was kind to the aliens near me and they were quite helpful in return, granting me new technology and telling me locations of enemy planets. They wanted the enemies gone, I wanted a planet. It worked out well for both of us. I imagine that some encounters beyond the tutorial may not be as straightforward, and that being too forthcoming might result in aliens taking advantage of you. My main issue with the game is the interface. Despite playing in the tutorial, there was a lot that wasn't explained. Some of it I was able to figure out, like I can't settle these planets because they're marked dead, but some I wasn't able to work through. Like, I accidentally formed a fleet between 2 of my ships. One was a survey ship, one was a combat ship. I wanted to send the survey ship to find artifacts and use the combat ship to find enemies, but for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to make a ship leave a fleet. And I really tried. As I said before, 4X strategy is not really my thing. but this was almost different enough to make me want to play more. In the end, I think the Sid Meier Civilization series is the only 4X for me. Next up is Hyperlight Drifter, a beautiful 2D hack and slasher. The first thing I have to touch on is the absolutely gorgeous pixel art on display here, perfectly complemented with an atmospheric soundtrack from the great Disaster piece. I actually backed this game on Kickstarter, and while a lot of those games fail to meet expectations, for me, this wasn't one of those games. The game plays in a top-down perspective and mostly comes down to dashing, slashing, and shooting. Dashing teleports you in whatever direction you're facing, useful for both dodging enemy attacks as well as for platforming. Slashing is your main attack. You'll be using it quite a bit. Shooting is situational, as you have to aim your shots and have limited ammo. Ammo is recharged by hitting enemies with slashes, and as you progress through the game, you earn additional guns to choose from for some more versatility. Along the way, you'll find health kits you can use to heal yourself, though they are in limited supply, and they take a moment to use, so they should be used sparingly. The game starts with its claws out, as you quickly run into encounters with several enemies and enemies that hit pretty hard, in arenas with lots of areas where you can easily fall. You'll have to keep a cool head and remain focused, or you'll quickly die. Oh, I forgot to mention, there's co-op. One of our first videos here on Bombchu was a review of the co-op for this game, and it's a lot of fun. I'll link to that review at the end of this video if you want to know more specifics about co-op. I've owned this game for more than a year, but I lost my save file before finishing it due to a hard drive issue. Playing it for this review, I think now is the perfect time to continue on and finish this game. Game 5 is Dark Souls II: Scholars of the First Sin, a reworked version of Dark Souls 2. If you aren't up to speed on the gist of Dark Souls, it's an action RPG that requires players to pay close attention to their surroundings, learning level layouts and enemy attack patterns, or face a quick and certain death. The tagline of the original game is "Prepare to die," and you likely will do just that. A lot. Dying makes you drop all your souls at that spot. Souls serve as money, as well as experience that can be spent to level up. Die again before picking up your souls, and they're gone. Dark Souls 2 adds a new mechanic to death. As you die, you'll start to become more and more hollow, reducing your maximum health. To restore your maximum health, you must consume an item or help someone else defeat a boss in order to become human again. Oh, did I not mention this game has multiplayer? If you're human, you can summon other players to your world to help you overcome obstacles in jolly cooperation. Successfully helping another player earns you souls, grants you humanity, and can be a great way to learn some of the level's traps without risking your own souls. In Dark Souls 1, playing with someone you know was almost impossible unless you had a connectivity mod. This has thankfully been improved in Dark Souls 2, as there's a ring you can use to align yourself to a specific god. Only players aligned to that god can see your summon signs. Players can also leave messages for everyone to see, both to help or hinder, or just for laughs. Bloodstains mark recent deaths in the area around you, and touching them will replay the end of that player's life, giving you a hint of what dangers lurk nearby. Multiplayer can also be less helpful, as when you're human, you can be invaded by other players seeking to kill you. There's nothing quite as frustrating as getting a ton of progress only to be invaded and killed. But, as they say, this is Dark Souls. Checkpoints come in the form of bonfires, which restore your health, and Estus flasks, which are the game's healing items. In Dark Souls 2, you can warp from any bonfire to any other bonfire you've been to before, whereas in Dark Souls 1, you could only warp to specific bonfires, and only after reaching a certain point in the game. Earlier, I mentioned that this is a rework of Dark Souls 2. What exactly does that mean? Along with some small graphical enhancements, the maximum number of player slots in multiplayer has been increased for more partners and more invaders alike. The most noticeable change is the enemy placements. Encounters are very different, with some difficult monsters showing up much earlier, and a lot of surprises for players of the original version. For example, in the original Dark Souls 2, Hyde's Tower of Flame just had these giant enemies present. In Scholars of the First Sin, it's also littered with Hyde Knights. When you first arrive, they only sit and watch you pass by unless you attack them first. That is, until you kill the boss of the area, sending all of them into a frenzy anytime you visit again in the future. It's a very interesting change that's more complex than simply relocating enemies, but also making you feel like you're having an effect on the world around you, which was something that many felt was missing from the original version. Oh yeah, and you get harassed by this new NPC invader called Forlorn throughout your journey. So that's cool. Dark Souls 2 is not the best in the series, but that's not to say it's a bad game. And while this enhanced version makes it a better game than it was, it's not without its issues. Having been out for over a year, I feel like Dark Souls 3 might have been a better choice, but if you've never played a Souls game or just haven't played 2, this isn't a bad way to jump in. I beat the original version of Dark Souls 2, but I'll be finishing this enhanced version for sure. This leads us to Armello, a strategy board game. I actually have a physical copy of this game from the indie box. Kotaku described this as Game of Thrones with animals, and they aren't far off with that statement. It's missing the blood, sex, and interesting story, but it does have a lot of betrayal in a high fantasy setting. Armello is described as a board game, but the rules and complexities have it closer to a very streamlined D&D or Pathfinders, with the competitive nature of board games thrown in, as there can only be one winner. I won't go over all the details or I'll be here all day, and you know how fun it is to listen to someone read all the rules of a complex board game. In broad strokes, you want to become the king or queen of the land. You have a home where you respawn if you die, and you traverse tiles seeking to complete quests to get stronger, gain equipment, and build your party. Quests and events test certain stats, with each point in that stat adding 10% to your chance of success. The penalty for failing is usually losing some amount of health. Combat is done with dice, and each combatant's total number of dice is determined by their stats, what tile they're on, the time of day, racial bonuses, as well as what cards are in play. Dice can be rolled as attack, defend, attack in the day, miss at night, attack in the night, miss in the day, explode, which is an attack with an extra die added to the roll, and pure miss. Defend dice cancel out attack dice from the other side, and any attacks remaining deal damage. That's about as deep as I want to explain the rules, as things get much more complex. Playing alone against AI, I got a bit overwhelmed by my options and a bit flustered by how powerful some cards are, and I'm not a fan of luck-based combat. Playing with friends, well, my friends are much smarter than me when it comes to strategy games, so I imagine I wouldn't fare much better there. In the end, I'd much rather play D&D, as half the fun there is playing on an actual tabletop, and you have friends on your team there to help you succeed against a common enemy, rather than to screw you over. I think there are a lot of people who will be able to enjoy this game. I'm just not one of them. Next is SimplePlanes, which is anything but simple to me. This game allows you to design your own plane and then fly it to try and complete different challenges. The plane you build may need to be modified for different challenges, as some challenges involve racing, some involve destroying targets with weapons, some involve flying under harsh weather conditions, etc. The plane designer has some great tools, and you aren't limited by money or other resources. The sky's the limit, literally. There are lots of objects to place, but you can reshape them, change their properties, and really get into the nitty-gritty if you want to. And thank goodness, there's an option to mirror one side of the plane to the other, so you don't have to do all your work twice to make a symmetrical plane. Following the guide, I made a decent plane pretty easily, and again, following the guide, takeoff and landing went off without a hitch. When they removed the training wheels, well, this happened. Yes, I am bad at both at building things and at flying planes. A double doozy that just isn't a great fit for me. This isn't as technical as it can get, but if you're a bit interested in planes and want to just have some fun, you'll likely have a good time here. Our final game is Sherlock Holmes, the Devil's Daughter. You play as, you guessed it, Sherlock Holmes. The game starts with a client, a young boy, coming to you for help. You quickly look him over to learn some information about his background, with some points of interest simply yielding information, and some requiring you to take an educated guess. After profiling your client, you ask them questions about their case. At certain points, they'll discuss information that matches or contradicts your profile of them. You have a limited time to hit a button and choose the data relevant to what the client is saying. This can let you know if the client is misleading you or being genuine, and it's a fun way to keep you paying close attention to the dialogue. Once you finish talking, you set off to look for clues. You're given an address and must find it without a waypoint, which has a certain charm to it. You have to look for street signs and address numbers. Once I found the address, the apartment of the boy and his missing father, I looked around for clues. I found a ladder, at the top of which was an area too dark to see, and I found a map displaying the location of a bar in what I assume was the father's pocket. I couldn't find anything to light the area above the ladder, so I decided to go check out the bar, only to have Sherlock tell me he wasn't thirsty. If this is a bar a missing person had some interest in, wouldn't it be a good idea to go there and ask around about him? I did some more looking, trying to find anyone I could talk to. A few doors I was allowed to knock on, but none of them yielded any results. I went back to the apartment building to see if I could talk to any neighbors, but none of those doors could be knocked on. There were some men behind the building, but I couldn't speak to any of them. And all of this exploring back and forth, not sure where to go, was made quite tedious due to the fact that you can't run. You can only walk at a pretty slow pace. I really enjoyed profiling and questioning people, but the on-foot sections have me scratching my head. I'll probably try to continue to see if I can get any further with the first case, but if it ends up remaining a where the heck do I go kind of game, I'll probably pass on this one. Last is the new comic included with the bundle, UnderWhere. I say new, this comic was actually originally published back in 1995. This bundle brings the third issue of 4, though if you missed the May or June bundles, it looks like they included the first and second issue here as well. My opinion hasn't changed much with this third issue, so if you want to hear my short thoughts on this comic, you can check out my review of the May bundle. It's a decent distraction, but I don't think anyone's buying the bundle for the bonus comic. So overall, how was this bundle? This month had another great and very out there exclusive, and the addition of the Humble Trove is a great addition for newer subscribers, and keeping those older exclusives from being lost to time. I already owned 3 games from this bundle, but having just passed 2,000 games in my library, that's to be expected, and I also managed to get a game out of my wishlist. There was once again no Humble debut game. I have to wonder if they've gotten rid of the debut games. It was cool to get games that had just launched, but I can't say I'd blame them, as the quality has not always been on par, and on more than one occasion, the debut title didn't launch on time. I'll be interested to see if they're revamping this behind the scenes to return to it later, or if they've just given up on it entirely. So how much bang for your buck was there? To total everything up, paying full price, these would all rack up a cost of $183. Getting all these at their lowest sale price would cost about $70. This is, again, a bit lower than usual on sale price, as a lot of the more expensive games at full price haven't had a proper price reduction outside of sales. A few of these games were not bad, but decent, with no real stinkers among them. But the bundle was overall carried by Dark Souls 2 and Hyperlight Drifter, which, together, even at their lowest price, are worth more than the $12 bundle cost. I'd say this bundle was not bad. Next month's bundle has 2 early unlocks with NBA 2K17 and Pillars of Eternity, and the last time we had 2 early unlocks, there were 9 games, so we may have a big month ahead of us. I can't wait to see what else is in there. Catch you next time.